Around the world, this site is recognized for an event that has forever changed us. In September of 2001, we entered a new age of danger. What most people don't realize is just a couple of blocks from ground zero, in a September 150 years ago, another event occurred that continues to shape history even to this day. Many things have changed in New York City since 1857, but in many ways, the climate of Lower Manhattan would be very familiar. Like now, it was the financial center of the country. And like now, the nation was in turmoil.
As he had always done in history, God moved in a period of time in which church historians would describe as a wintry season for the church.
In 1857, there were 30,000 men that were idle in the streets. Unemployment was rampant. Drunkenness was rampant, and the nation was divided by the issue of slavery.
The Dutch Reformed Church had a congregation at the corner of Fulton and Williams Street, but they had decided to move their location to the north.
That left them with a dilemma, since they were going to close a church and therefore remove a witness from that region, which is filled with thousands of people, many of them very poor. They decided to establish a mission in its place. They hired a young man with a lot of promise and a lot of energy and a lot of ideas to be their leader of that new ministry. And his name was Jeremiah Lanphier.
And he walked the streets around the church. And as he did, he noticed the businessmen whom he passed on the streets with very anxious appearances and very worried, obviously, about something, because this nation was standing on the brink of economic disaster.
After widely publicizing a noontime prayer meeting, Jeremiah Lanphier opened the doors and began to pray. And for the first 30 minutes, no one came. But by the time the hour was over, 5 other men had joined him. The next meeting there were 20, then 40, and then 100. Within 3 months, there were over 100 meetings in the city, with more than 50,000 New Yorkers pausing daily to pray.
It's interesting, in one of Jeremiah Lanphier's journal entries, when they had up to about 200 men, he noted that not one woman was present. But then later, in another journal entry, he mentioned that women were coming in specifically for the meetings, and that their softer voices, their voices softened the harsher voices of their brethren. So it was an interesting way to put it.
Prayer is the one thing that, more than anything else, connects us to God, but also connects us to one another. Part of the genius of the Fulton Street prayer meeting was that it brought people together across denominational lines.
It became really an act of spreading the word through prayer, which is, of course, the unique thing that we look at today, and it led to a very significant thing in this country. It went beyond New York City into New Jersey, upstate, up to New England and Pennsylvania, and eventually over the whole country.
In a period of, let's say, 18 months, 1 million people were converted to Jesus Christ in the United States. If we had revival like that today, it would mean the conversion of 10 million people.
The Fulton Street Revival launched a great missions movement in America that sent missionaries around the world to India, China, and Korea.
Reverend Horace Underwood, who was a seminary student at the time, he was deeply influenced by the Fulton Street Revival, and he took the message of hope for the poor, hope for the lost, and hope for the unchurched to Korea. We now have 50,000 churches in Korea, 13 million Christians, and we now send the most number of Christian missionaries to the world per capita next to the United States.
When I hear about the Fulton Street Revival, I think of one of the great unreported revivals of all time. But when we look back, we really see that this was not a movement of great men or great women. This was a movement of a simple layman who was left behind by a relocating church.
The movement of God known as the Fulton Street Revival that occurred 150 years ago is important today because it reminds us that God can do it again. I believe that this celebration is really an extension of what occurred 150 years ago. And God is still in the business of moving in New York City.
If God does a great work in New York City, there'll be people who travel from all over the world just to experience the presence of God, go back home, and maybe God would bring revival to nation after nation around the world. He has done it before, and my prayer is that we would be the kind of people through whom He could do it again.
So what do? Well, someone has to be a Jeremiah Lanphier. Someone has to pray. What about you? You could be the one that hits your knees on behalf of your city, on behalf of your community. You could be the one who helps lead the way in your own area to gather people together in the marketplaces and the neighborhoods and the schools and restaurants, and bring people together to pray in those settings, and bring people that don't know Christ together in relationship with you and others so they can meet our Lord too. It has to start somewhere, and it started in 1857 with 1, and then 6, and then thousands, and then millions. And today, it may be back to 1. That's where it'll start, and that 1 might be you.